How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to take a look at Stellar Blade now that it's available on PC. We're going to have a discussion about the game as a whole because it has some interesting aspects that I want to discuss with you guys. And we're also going to be taking a look at the Eve character model. So let's get started. Alright, so when it comes to Stellar Blade, I thought it was pretty interesting because this game was made with Unreal Engine 4.26. To me, that was like peak Unreal Engine 4. It was right there before a couple of iterations, and then they switched to Unreal Engine 5. Now, there's going to be a couple of things that I'm going to mention that people might take as a negative, but please watch the whole thing. It's actually positive. One of the things that I noticed is you can see this game looks a little bit old gen, meaning that most of the textures that you see, like what you're seeing now on screen, you see that it's a lot of painted surface that's probably has a little bit of metal. You can actually tell what's normal maps and what isn't. And it lacks a little bit of specularity and reflections. That's very common in all generations regarding the texture. We're going to talk about the geometry in a bit when we get into her fighting in the city. So one of the things that caught my attention is that you can clearly see that they put the most detail and geometry into the character models, and they had to kind of like compromise when it comes to the environment. The monsters and all the other NPCs are also very well realized. I'd say they're almost one-to-one with Eve and her friends. But if you see the environment compared to other games, especially if you just saw the other video that I made about the Witcher 4 tech demo, you can see there's quite a leap here visually because of how low poly the environment is. And I know that sounded pretty negative, but it isn't. What I want to get across is this already looks good. I mean, anything beyond this, it's already hitting more into like the cinematic stuff other than video games. And one of the things that I wanted to mention, especially for all the indie developers that I know who watch my channel, is you have the tools to make your game super cinematic, extremely realistic, but you don't have to. This already looks pretty good. A lot of gamers like this. And you gotta remember always, the number one thing about video games is they have to be fun. They have to have fun mechanics. Visuals need to come later. Now, when you talk about something like The Witcher 4 with CDPR, or even what GTA 6 is going to be next year with Rockstars, those teams are huge, and they probably have a lot of people dedicated just to optimizing things, optimizing the engine. I am positive The Witcher 4, as much as that was a tech demo that we saw the other day, I'm positive the game will run very good because Epic has an interest in this game running at max. So I'm pretty sure we're going to see some very cool stuff once The Witcher 4 actually comes out. But when it comes to indies and AA development, you don't have all those resources. So you have to play into what looks the best for the budget that you're managing. I've seen many indie games trying to hit that high realism, high AAA visual cap and then the games kind of run a little bit not great. Let's just put it that way. The games don't run amazing. I'm sure some games are coming to mind. Just let me know in the comments down below which game do you think that I'm talking about. You can do something like this that I still think it looks great. You can put the detail on your character. People are going to love it, but still the game performs well. One of the things that people always appreciate is a game that performs better than a game that looks better. People always love a game that runs flawlessly at uncapped frames per second, as opposed to a game that looks amazing, but you have to compromise on only running it at 30 frames per second. if probably a little bit slower with dips here and there. Yeah, so hopefully I see more indies doing this because Nanite is awesome, Lumen is fantastic, and there are ways to take advantage of that. But bake lighting, bake GI, there's also stationary lights that you can use. You don't have to decide of static light or moving light. You can use stationary, and there are ways to do it with RTX GI, where you can use probes to simulate dynamic light situations inside Unreal Engine. All right, with that being said, let's go and look at the character model. All right, here we are in Blender, and as you can see, we got this great bear right here. You know, this is the costume that everybody was looking forward to seeing about Stellar Bright, and of course, I'm kidding. Hopefully I didn't lose a lot of you. When I was browsing through the files to see what skins to get out, I found this, and I thought it was, I've only played demos so far, so when does this thing come up? Is this an actual character in game? I just think it's hilarious. Let's just look at geometry real quick, just for fun's sake. Yeah, you can see this bear is pretty dense. It looks amazing. This bear is super dense, and if we turn on stats, it's gonna be 36,000 just for this bear alone, which, hey, it's pretty good if you like a bear costume in Stellar Blade. Now let's actually look at Eve. Okay, here we are. This is Eve in one of her costumes, and I managed to get like the hair textures and all. There is a thing with the hair because the hair shader is a little bit complex. We're going to talk about that in the texture section, and we're also going to talk about the eyes. The eyes it's another complex shader. We'll talk about it in the UV section, but for now, I just wanted you to take a look at the Eve character. Fantastic looking character. Now, if you see her stats, let me select this whole thing. She is 210,000 polys. So one of the things that I was thinking in the beginning is there's quite a bit of a difference that you can tell between the density of the character and the rest of the environment. The rest of the environment looks very low poly compared to her design. But again, that has to do with what the developer's intending to do. This is a very character focused game. So yes, let's throw all the geometry at the character because that is what the player is going to be looking at for most of the time. And I'm pretty sure a lot of players that like Stellar Blade appreciate that too. She has textures that are very, very well defined. I managed to get the normal maps for this one too. So that's why this texture probably looks a little bit better than other games that we've seen here, because I have the normal maps not only for the body but also for the rest of her outfit. All right, just real quick, the hair cards are that they're just hair cards. Let's just go into this mode. As you can see, there's a lot of hair cards right here. Same thing with the ponytail, is just hair cards. This is rigged. So there is no physics with the hair. There's a lot of rigging in here, not only for the ponytail, but also for this, the bangs. And this, I don't know how you call this thing that hang when you have hair hanging out like that, but everything has armature all around that. Now let's just take a quick look at the UVs for the ponytail. You can see it right here. The way that the hair cards are distributed is just all of them put into a texture sheet this way, and then they inherit all the textures that you see right here. That's how the ponytail is conformed. And if we switch to the hair on her skull, go to edit mode, and you can see same texture sheet as the ponytail, is just different hairs here. So the cards for the ponytail, if you remember, they were all the way to here, and as you can see, these go all the way around here. Now, the thing about the hair and why the hair looks so thin here in Blender is because inside of the material, this hair also has several masks that construct the material inside Unreal, where they make the roots of the hair much thicker than the portion of like the outer portion, the external portion. So that makes a little bit more of a full hair card, and it's one of the tricks that you sometimes have to use in order to get hair cards looking great. Now, I know I breezed through the hair cards real quick because we've already seen a lot in this, not too much when it comes to hair cards. But let's look at her face. We usually don't look at faces because if you've seen my other videos, same topology all around. Usually the topology of the face is pretty typical. Whether you're using a base mesh or not, there are certain standards, certain parameters that you need to follow when it comes to the topology of the face. So when around the eyes, you need to create concentric circles. Same thing with the nostrils and same thing with the mouth. There's a certain flow that you need to follow in order for those things to deform well. So when it comes to, this was interesting, the way that the eyelashes are constructed. You can see there are hair cards, but instead of being alphas, they're constructed like little hairs. So this was very interesting because usually when I see eyelashes, they're just squared hair cards, and these are just like actual hair cards in a point. I think it's pretty interesting. The other thing is, if you remember from the video that I did on Starfield when we looked at the character, it was like one strip of polygons that was taken out of the head topology to do the eyebrows. In this case, as usual, this is the more typical way that games do hair cards. Is just a collection of little cards, and this is how you do eyebrows if you want them to be a little bit more 3D as opposed to just have them painted on the model UVs, which it can be common sometimes, especially when you're doing stylists. They're usually painted with normal maps in there. Let's see the UVs pretty quick. I'm gonna go into here. And one of the things about these UVs is, as you can see, there's a lot going on because we have her teeth, her eyes, and so as you can see, what they did is they have the seams right here. To be honest, one of the things that it's always very interesting for me is to see how they unwrapped the face and how they squared off all these UVs. Because when you square UVs, usually things can get distorted, especially if you're dealing with normal maps. But in here, they managed to square them off, even if into these corners, in a way that doesn't distort. So as you can see, these polygons are kind of squished, but these are more relaxed all around here. And they also, this is what's weird to me, is how they kind of like peel around the ear. So one thing you need to take into account when creating hair cards is sometimes you just need the scalp portion. And this is what I'm 90% sure this is what they did here. They just got the scalp portion. This is probably a single color, and then you're just going to have a bunch of hair cards on top of this. Usually I've seen certain add-ons for Blender where if you're doing hair cards, it helps a lot when you just have the scalp as opposed to just have the whole head geometry. The other way that I've seen this done is with grooms. You actually take out the scalp, you create your grooms. Your grooms is like the thing that looks like actual hair, because it's just splines, and then you turn that into hair cards. I know there's another add-on for that, at least on the Blender side. There are other ways to do it in various DCC apps. But if we just hide the face, you can see, like we've been having all these parts, you can see the creepy eyes with the eyelashes and the mouth back, which is pretty funny. You can see the tongue part sticking out. Always be mindful of making your mouth back if your character is going to be talking. Very important. Now, when it comes to the eyes, this is where I'm going to explain why this was a little bit of a pain. So if we select the whole eye, you can see that the whole eye is right there, but there's also something on top. You can see, like, if I select this thing, it will probably select the whole eye, but there's something on top of this, and this is usually to simulate like kind of like the watery part of your eye. So this is mostly like in-engine shader. Actually in Unreal it's pretty easy to do, and I've shown it before where the metahumans have this kind of materials in there. There's like this start of your eye, which is always a certain shade of pink, and it's always a different roughness than the rest of the eye. So pretty intricate eye. Okay, so let's take a look at the body, and let's grab this. As you can see, the legs are separated, are different mesh from the rest. So if we isolate them, again, they're not welded. And this probably has to do with how her costumes are shaped, because she has a lot of costumes. And this is one way that may be easier, not only to unwrap, because again, you can just put the seam around here. We'll look at the UVs in a second. So moving on, you can see the hands. The hands usually follow that topology that we've been talking about, where you can see they kind of made the nails over here. And then it's pretty much a cylinder, nothing too special except for this little crevices right here that you have in between each finger. Where there's some triangles, and this is one of those things where I'm wondering if it was probably Blender, because it's not meshing with the same across the whole hand. So what I'm thinking is the flow was completely fine all around. And then there's probably triangles here. This is something that I usually see with hand topology when it gets closer to the wrist, so that your arm isn't as dense as your hand, because it doesn't need to. Usually your hands is much denser than the rest of the arm, because you have your fingers and you want, fine motion on your fingers. But then you just triangulate things to reduce the poly count, not so much, but to somewhat reduce it. You do have these accessories, which are not part of her whole body, and you can hide them and you can see the rest of the arm. These are just extra add-ons. One of the things is, look how dense this part is, and this has to do with the way that this is rigged. Now this may be an LOD 0. That means the most defined level of detail. I've talked about level of detail in my other videos. So this is probably the cinematic one, and that's maybe why she's so dense. That being said, when I was looking at the game, you can get pretty close to her. So the geometry wasn't, if this is the LOD 0 and not the in-game mesh, the difference between geometries is not that big, because I saw like the in-game mesh was pretty good looking. I'm positive is very close to what we're seeing right now. So you can see all her accessories here, the metal stuff looks pretty awesome. If we see if I can select this whole thing and hide it so we can see the metal bits from the back. All these cables going around and going into these parts right here. Very interesting. This kind of cable that looks like an old SATA cable that we used to do for hard drive. I love the spine bits. There's actually one skin that I'm not gonna show here because I don't want to be demonetized, but there is one skin that has the spine definition amazingly done. But you can see how intricate the detail is here, even though this part is covered, because she has this little flappy thing that's covering all this, but there is a lot of definition here. They didn't go with normal maps, it's just pure geometry. And again, this is one of those things where this game doesn't have nanite. There is no nanite whatsoever because it's 4.26. Nanite was not invented yet when this Unreal Engine version existed. So there is no nanite going on in the environment or in the character, because some people have mentioned whenever I show the density of the character and they see that the character is super dense and it's running on Unreal Engine 5, a lot of people have said, well, they're using nanite. When it comes to nanite, it's mostly to the environment. We do have something called nanite skeletal mesh, but that is super experimental. Even in the new Unreal Engine showcase, they didn't get too much into it, and they didn't even mention it. Like, I thought when they were doing The Witcher 4, they were going to talk about nanite skeletal mesh. They didn't even mention that. So all the density that you're seeing in Unreal Engine games is how they are. It's no nanite. No one is using nanite skeletal mesh as of the recording of this video. Maybe if we move far ahead, we'll see that happening. But so far, pure geometry, what's going on with these characters. Let's go to the UVs. All right, so we have the body is divided into several pieces. So we have kind of like the main body, which encompasses the torso, midsection, and legs. And then we have kind of like this part, which is actual skin. and then the other parts are labeled as accessories in this. So as you can see, the UVs, pretty standard, nothing too insane, but still looking great. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I just put it over the normal maps. I think the UVs are sometimes easier to see over the normal maps. So you can see her whole leg is unwrapped in a seam, in the inner seam. And then you can see that all the way into her feet is just one single piece together. So one of the things that we don't see here is the mirror trick, because usually you've seen me point out about where you actually take things out of the 0 to 1 space to maybe here, or just put them one on top of the other. This doesn't quite function here because her suit is one single suit, and it can look weird when you do that. Sometimes it can create artifacts. Not necessarily when baking, but when making the textures. And from what I've seen, some of her costumes are also not symmetrical. So again, it always depends on what you're constructing. You can see that this is all the machining parts. We select this whole thing. It's a completely different UV set for a different material. And you can see this whole thing. All the machine bits, hard surface, of course, much easier to unwrap. They're all in various little bits. And as you can see, I think I'm going to start showing textures with normal maps if I can find them, because I think you can see it more defined. You can appreciate the UVs a little bit more. Now, when it comes to her skin, it's only her arms in this case. For the most part, like her whole body is never underneath the suit. Because it's a skin tight suit, you can get away with just having things like the arms and that. And I'm not going to pull on the UVs and the texture maps, because just like last time with when I was doing Loon with Clair Obscure, YouTube doesn't understand the difference between it's just a texture versus I'm showing a fully nude lady, because I just got monetized and I don't want the channel to have demonetized videos just yet. But this is just part of the skin, and it's just like the usual geometry and usual UVs that we see. Now, these are the bits and pieces that I didn't pull out, and they are part of the body, as you can see them right here in the UVs. This is the same UVs that we saw for the rest of the body. You can see the normal maps for the definition. We haven't spoken too much about textures. So when it comes to normal maps, this texture is only, like, as you can see here, defining very, very fine detail that if it was made with geometry, it would be insane. And the reason that this map is colored, back in the day, and that was probably like before 2011 or something, these maps used to be black and white. It used to be a bump map. You could see a little bit of detail on the texture, but it didn't react to light. The reason why we have these maps made of color is because that way the map reacts to light. So you can see the light actually going across all those details as if they were 3D. And that's one of the reasons why you see this right here. All right, everybody, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching all the way till this point. My socials are below in the description. There's a playlist down below if you want to watch my other videos, because on each video, there's something about the 3D model that I mentioned that is new. So make sure you've watched everything all the way to this point so you understand certain things that I reference. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe, leave a like and all that, and I'll see you in the next one.